hope it works now. Okay, so we are going to look at how to determine VNet peering uses. I just told you the reason why we might need to peer our VNet, because we want those services when they are not deployed within the same network to be able to communicate with each other. Then we'll look at how to determine the gateway transit and connectivity need. Now, what happens is when you try to extend your on-premises, or when you try to extend your VNet in Azure to your on-premises environment, you need what we call the gateway network. So we need to set those gateway devices, the VPN gateway in Azure, to be able to communicate. Then we'll look at how to create the VNet peering for sure. See what are some of the settings we need to put in place, to make sure that VNet peering actually comes to life. We talk about what we call service training, just like the routing I was just talking about, then demonstration on how to peer a VNet. So there are some pros and cons when it comes to VNet peering. One thing I need you to understand is when you want to leverage VNet peering, you need to make sure that those VNet do not have IP address space that overlaps. Now, let's say when you are creating your VNet, because by default Azure will always give you this 192.168.0.0, and if you keep using that particular IP address, you can create different VNet with the same IP address space. But what you cannot do is to pair those VNets together. So we're going to look at, when I start talking about it, you will see what I mean. So here is talking about VNet peering. Like I said, you want to connect two VNet together, and that's what VNet peering does. Now, regardless of where that VNet is, it is not just for VNets that are actually within your tenant. You can actually, create a VNet in your tenant and connect it with a VNet in Gmos tenant. So in that regard, would say what we're doing is like a global peering. So regardless of where you want to peer, you can peer within the same subscription, different subscription, the same tenant, different tenants. So there is no limitations when it comes to what you can actually peer. And the question will be, how do we peer a VNet in my tenant? Okay, I think I should, instead of reading this thing one after the other, I think we should just see what I'm talking about. Then we can just quickly skip what we have here. Just hold on, let this come up. Got so many. Yeah, that's fine. So what I'm going to do to make this easy, I'm going to create two different VNets and we're going to pair them together. So you understand what I mean by, okay, let's say 3. So here, let me just quickly create VNet. So the best way I go about, looking for a resource or service I want to create is just for me to search instead of going to create a resource and the likes. So we've got VNet here. I'll tell you what I meant by, if you go with the default VNet, or address space that Azure gives you every time, there will be problem when you want to, pair them, because like I said, VNet address space must not overlap. So this is, I don't know why it takes a while now. Okay, so I'm just going to create like a new and say VNet pairing. Just going to do that. Then virtual network, you need to give it a name. This is me creating a VNet. We talked about VNet the last time, but this is me creating a VNet. I'm just going to say VNet test 1. And I'm going to have this deployed within my West Europe environment. Now, this is what I meant by if you go with the default address space. Imagine I just come here and click review and create. So that means I've skipped the security tab. I've skipped the address IP addresses space tab. I've skipped the tag tab, and I just went straight to, you know, review and create. And this is what this does. By default, Azure is always going to give you this particular address space, which is 10.0.0.0/16. Now you can create. So I'll go ahead and create this though. That's the first VNet. So if you do this, that means any other VNet with the same address space, you're not going to be able to connect. So I'm going to create 3 VNets. So I'll just go back to this particular resource group and create a new VNet. So don't forget we created the VNet 1 already, which is VNet test 1. So I'm going to just go back and search for VNet. So I want you guys to see what. So it needs me to. So another way is just for you to look for the category here. Where is networking? Okay, let me just search for it. So these are different appliances. The virtual network. What's going on? Okay, I'll go back to the quickest way to do this. I don't know why that is not coming up. So I'll create another one. Then I'm going to use the same resource group. So I've got a resource book already. So like I said, VNet peering is not limited to, resource group, subscription, so test 2. And I'm going to create the same thing, just the same one I've created. Then I'm going to create the last one. So you can see the same address space. I didn't change anything. Yep. So let this one. And the last one. So we're talking about the 2 types of VNet peering that we have. We've got the regional and we've got the global. So for the global, when you want to pair VNet, that exists within 2 different regions, so you leverage on the global. Though there's no options, when you want to, create the VNet, but that's the global pairing. So when you pair 2 VNets together that exist in the same region, we call it regional pairing. So let me create the last VNet here. And this time I'm going to change the address space. So VNet pairing, I'm going to change, and I say VNet test 3. I'm going to change this to maybe Mexico Central, which is fine. Then I'm going to come here to the address space. I don't want the 10.0.0.0. No, I want something else. So I can have 10.1, and this is going to be a different. Now you can even see why, before changing this particular one, this guy is telling me that, we've got like a particular VNet that have got this same address space. If you intend to pair this network, you must change the address space, because it knows that, what Azure is telling you here is, if you go out with this particular address space, you're never going to be able to pair it with this particular network because the IP address, will overlap. So if I go back to the 00, you would see what will happen. So it's randomly just bringing out one particular one, but if I have to, yes, I've got 3. So no network has been, configured with 10.3.0.0 address space. And when I talk about the address space for people that are new to networking, so we're talking about, so for every devices that gets connected, rather maybe whether to the internet or let me say either to the internet or even within your network, so when your network is not, when your devices is not connected to the internet, there is no need for a public IP address. What you can see here is the private IP address that will be attached or assigned to devices that are connected within this particular VNet. Like I said, your devices on-premises environment cannot connect to devices, within the Azure space, just because, they are not within the same private network. The IP addresses that you can see here are just private IP addresses. They are going to be assigned to devices within this network. So when you finally do a VPN, and that's why we say VPN, virtual private network, so that's where the private comes in. That's what we now make your on-premises device, your laptop, to be able to connect to devices or services within the Azure environment. So I'll go ahead. So when you see this space, so each of these IP addresses that you can see, currently we have 65,536 are the one that will be assigned to each devices, that you want within that particular VNet. So if I don't need up to that, which technically I don't, I can reduce this to /25, and this is going to tell me, man, yes, you've reduced this subnet is out of range. How can you have, for the whole network, you're saying you have 128 addresses, and this one is 20. So I'm just going to delete this or edit this, so that it goes with, the CIDR block that I've changed. Just give me a minute, please. So I'm going to select the size. So I'm just going to select /29, or let's say /26. So can anyone tell me what subnets are? What subnets? Anyone? I'm going to go ahead to create this.
It's a way to isolate your network.
Hold on, give me a minute. I think I've got I can't really hear you guys. Yeah. Can you say that again?
Network isolation.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Can you hear me?
there are chunks of your network. Yeah, like you
Yes.
said. Thank you. So I'm going to go back to this resource group now. And now we currently have different, three different VNets within the environment. Now I'm going to illustrate something before. Okay, let me connect this first and let's even see. So currently those devices, we do not have any device within those VNet because they are newly created. But let's say we've got devices attached to those VNets. Now currently the devices within the VNet 1 will not be able to talk to devices in VNet 2. So for me to be able to do that, I'm going to go to this particular blade and try to create like a pairing between this particular network and the VNet 2. I don't know what's going on with my Azure environment. Okay, for a while it's not been behaving well. So it's taking all the time in the world. What's going on? this is one thing about live classes. If it was to be, me recording videos, all this would be bloopers. I would remove them. Okay, so this is the private link. I need to give it a name. But what I do most is just to say vnet1, which is the name of um the first vnet, to, let's say, vnet test 2, something like this. Now, the resource manager, do you want to do classic? No classic anymore. So those are, the type of VNet that we use to create. Then select the virtual network. Now, for this virtual network, I'm just going to select the VNet1, VNet2, because that's the one I want to connect to. I want to connect from. So I'm going to select the VNet2. Now you can see the problem. This guy immediately tells me that, you cannot connect those two VNet together, because they've got the same address space. Just imagine, a fully deployed environment, that has been there for years, and you are like, okay, let's do some remediation within the environment. You come in there and you try to pair those devices, or they are even telling you, we want devices in this particular VNet to be able to communicate with this particular, or they might not even tell you like that. They just say, oh, we've got an issue. There's a virtual machine deployed in VNet1, and we want that virtual machine, to be able to talk to the database that is actually in VNet2. And you know that for you to do that, you need, to communicate. You need to let them communicate. You need to pair those VNet together. Now the problem lies where you start trying to, set this up, and you realize that they've got the same address space. Even if they've not got the same address space, imagine, let's say I have 10.0.0.0, and this other one is 10.0.1.0. Is still, a conflict. It's still within 10.1.0, is still within this 10.0.0.0. I won't still be able to connect, those VNet together. So now there is nothing I can do. This is never going to connect. So the next one, I'm just going to pick the VNet3, because that guy, I've got a different address space from the VNet1. And you notice that immediately I pick this, I'm able to, set this up. Now, this is going to tell you some of the connection you want to make, or settings you want to. By default, if you just want the normal connection to happen, you just leave this as default and go ahead and complete it. But if you want to allow some other things, maybe you want to forward all traffic, coming from VNet3 to VNet1, yes, you can check this. You want to do gateway. So for this gateway, we do not need it. Anything gateway, we do not need it. We only allow gateway when we want to extend the traffic to our on-premises environment. So when you set up a peering, or when you set up VNet peering within your environment, you do not need to allow gateway, because you are not gateways are only needed when you are extending it out of that particular environment. So, but because VNet happens within the Azure space, within the Azure environment, so there is no reason to allow the traffic. Now, have you guys got any question here? Have you guys got any question? I want to be sure you guys, are good. Okay, so if you guys have
I,
got no question,
I have
okay,
a question. I have a
yeah,
question.
please.
I thought that the gateway was for the internet.
The gateway, when you want to extend it,
It's for the internet, right?
not for the internet, when you want to extend to on premises, if
Oh,
you're
okay.
extending it out, if you're extending it out, so because you want to follow the traffic out of that particular environment, it might be internet also, because you are, at that point in time, it's going out of your environment, right? So
Okay.
we can actually say, but anything that comes with the fact that you want to extend, or you want to, push that
So
particular
that
traffic out, yeah.
so that would be the VPN gateway. then?
Yeah, it
Is
will
that
be the VPN. Yeah, it will be
attached
the
to the
VPN.
gateway, right?
Yeah, it will
Okay.
be the VPN. Yeah. Now,
Okay.
so if you guys have got no other question, that was this question I want you guys to ask. You're not asking it. Now, I told you guys that you can connect to, VNet that don't even exist within your own environment. VNet in other tenants. And you can see that when I wanted to actually pick this particular VNet, I'm only seeing the ones within my environment, drop down. Even if you search this, if you filter it out, you're only going to see, the ones within my environment. How do you guys think I'm going to be able to connect to the other one? From a different. Just look at all the settings that you currently have. The answer is there. What do you feel I would do? If I want to connect this to um a different VNet in a different environment. Do you want me to expand this? Yep. I'm still waiting. Anyone? All right. 1 point removed from everyone's point. Oh, okay, you guys don't have points. Okay, so let me just tell you what you need to do. So here you need to check this button. Now, when you check this button, you are telling the resource ID, because that's the only way you can actually connect to a different, you know, um, to a different resource, a different environment. So how do we now get this resource ID? What would be the resource ID for, let's even say, I've got this, let's say VNet 3, and anyone, this is common to all the services that we have in Azure. How do I get a resource ID from this particular, resource? It doesn't have to be VNet only, like I said, the resource ID for each resource that you create within the Azure environment, they are going to have what we call the resource ID. How do you get the resource ID from your resource? Anyone? All right, you guys need to start searching. So you're not going to see these here. It's not the name. Technically, it's not the name. Network ID is not the network ID. So if you want to get the resource ID, all you need to do is go to the settings blade. On that settings, go to properties, and you're going to see the resource ID. This is the resource ID, and this is what I mean. So in case your VNet exist in a different tenant or in a different subscription, you can see what's happening. It's going to tell you this is the subscription, the resource group, the provider. So it's just not say, the name of the VNet, because if that is the case, I won't be able to connect because your VNet doesn't exist within my own environment. So if I know the VNet ID, or yeah, I can come paste it there, and you can see took that, and I'm just going to give it a name here also, because the name here is the one that will show within the VNet 1. So I need to give the name that will show within the VNet 2. So let's say VNet 2 to VNet 1. That's what I'm just going to continue with it. And you can see at the same time it's deploying two peering at the same time. So what is going to happen is it's going to configure the peering on VNet 1. Also, it's going to do this on VNet 3. So you do not need to go to VNet 3 to start configuring the VNet peering anymore. So it's going to show up there. So I'm just going to click on my VNet, and within the overview you can see if there is a peering already configured within your VNet. So this is for the VNet 3. I'm going to go here and let's see. No, man, it's too slow, man. What's going on? That popped out already. Oh my. Let's just hold on, please. Yep. So VNet 1, the VNet 3. Okay, why this is loading? Okay, let me just wait. Come on. So you can see, even from the overview, you can see, the peering. Um, here you can see one network is already paired with this particular VNet. So you can either go to this, particular blade and pierce, click on the pairing, or even from here, whichever suits you well. So I can from here go. And what you're gonna see is the connection status, the name, and the likes. I can't really remember everything. Okay, just hold on. So let's see. Just hold on, please. What's going on, man? All right, so you can see now that we've got this connection. Okay, I think I missed it. The second one should be the name. So you can see fully synchronized, meaning there is synchronization happening between the two VNets. Now you can also see that we've got the pairing state. Now the pairing state now shows that this guy is fully connected to the other VNet. And what's the remote VNet? What VNet is it connected to? And you can see is VNet 3. Do we have any virtual appliance? No. It's virtual gateway. No, I don't need it. Now, cross tenant synchronization, is it happening? Is it from a different tenant? Currently no, because it's not cross tenant. It's actually happening within the same tenant. So that's the same thing you're gonna see here. The only thing that will change will be the remote virtual network. On the other one is going to be VNet 1, and here the name is just going to change based on what I've set in there. So nothing really. That's how we do the VNet pairing. Let's say those VNet has already been deployed and you want to check if you are able to connect or um, connect them together or pair them together. So even before going to the pairing blade and you trying to create a pairing, you can actually check the address space. But one thing about this thing is you cannot change the address space once you have it there. I've never seen but the only thing you can do is to add more address space, or even maybe delete the. And this is one of the reasons why it make more sense if you are actually deploying using IAC like Terraform and the likes. You can just go to your code, change what you need to change, redeploy, immediately you have it there. So those are things that you need to know when it comes to the VNing. Now all the connected devices here, because I've got no connected devices, so if I deploy a virtual machine now and that virtual machine it's giving an IP address within that particular subnet, then you would see it show up here. Not only virtual machine, let's say I've got some other devices like Bastion, that allows your VM to be connected to via RDP without you connecting over a public IP address and the likes. You can actually, you would actually have it here also. So all devices that we have here, they're going to show once they are here, and all all those devices, because I've been able to connect the VNet 1 and VNet 3 together, then those devices are going to be able to connect together. Before I move out, or before I move back to my PowerPoint slide, I'm just going to quickly show you some of these things that we have here. So the subnet, we've checked the address space where you would see, the IP addresses that you have within your VNet. Now we look at the subnet. Now there are different types of subnet that you can actually create. The one we are used to, or the one we can see here, is the default subnet. There are other subnets that we are going to be looking at, and I just want you guys to have that. So if you want to connect your devices to your network, we are going to be leveraging what we call the default subnet. And the default subnet is, at least you must have at least one default subnet when you create your VNet. Now there are other type of VNet subnets that we can actually create, depending on the need. Let's say you want to create a firewall, or you want to connect, when you want to create a firewall, your firewall needs its own subnet. You cannot deploy other resources within a firewall subnet. So when you create your VNet, you need to create a subnet specifically for your firewall, and you don't create your Azure firewall subnet. Maybe just say, oh, okay, let me create the default this default subnet, and I will use it for the firewall. No, the firewall, Azure has a default subnet for firewall. Just the same way, let's say you want to extend your on-premises environment, you want to create VPN within your network. Now when you want to create a VPN within your network, you need to create like a VPN gateway subnet also, and that is where all devices coming from on-premises connecting to that your VNet, that's where the IP addresses are going to be assigned to them. That's where they're going to be living when they finally get to your on-premises, to your Azure environment. So if I drop this down, you would see we've got other ones like the virtual network gateway I just talked about, the Azure firewalls I just talked about, this Azure Bastion. Like I said, I RDP into my virtual machine in Azure. So if you want to do an RDP, you need the public IP address to be able to RDP from your on-premises environment. But I don't want that, because even my virtual machine that I've created in Azure doesn't even have a public IP address, and I still want to connect to it. So the only way I can do that is to leverage this Azure Bastion. It gives you access to be able to connect to devices or resources in Azure, over RDP, Windows machine for sure, over RDP without you uh needing a public IP address. So I'm going to just back this down. So everything you're going to be seeing here is what I just showed you. So two types, like I said, when you have two different regions being connected together, your VNet exists in different regions. Would say what you're doing is the global, VNet peering. And when you have your VNet that exist in the same region, would say, you're doing what we call a regional VNet peering. So I've told you guys you can connect to Azure Virtual Network regardless of the environment, the tenant, the subscription, the resource group where they are. Peered network use what we call the Azure backbone for privacy. Yes, they're still going to be private. When you create your Azure peering, it's still not going out of that particular Azure environment. Those VNets are just able to talk to each other so that they can allow the communication between devices within them, but it doesn't extend to on-premises except when you now create like a VPN and the likes. So now let's talk about transit gateway and connectivity. We just talked about the fact that at some point you want to extend your virtual network to on-premises environment, so that devices on your on-premises environment can actually connect to resources that you've deployed within your Azure environment. A typical example would be your virtual machine in Azure or your database in Azure, regardless of the one you want to connect to. Now, you need what we call like a gateway transit, and what this does, number one, it allows peer network to share, gateway to get access to resources, and that's what's happening. So when you create like a peer environment, what they are going to, or a peer network, what they are going to be able to do is to be able to communicate. So we have this gateway, between them, that allows that communication. No VPN gateway is required, for paired spoke network. Yes, like I said, and that was why, I never, check that option of gateway, because by default they are going to be able to connect. Default VNet peering provide full connectivity. Yes, full connectivity regardless of where they are. Now, a question I'm going to ask you guys, you can see, let's even say there was no overlapping of IP address space between the VNet 1 and VNet 2 I created. Now, I'm able to connect. So this is my VNet 1, which is VNet A. This is my VNet B, and take this one as my VNet C. Take this one as my VNet C. This guy here, take it as my VNet C. I've been able to pair VNet A to VNet C, and I've been able to pair VNet B to VNet C, as you can see here. The question will be, this machine here, will it be able to talk to this machine here? Anyone? So understand what the question again. My VNet A is connected to my VNet C. My VNet B is connected to my VNet C. There is no information about my VNet A directly connected to my VNet B. But I've got this VNet A connected to VNet C and VNet B connected to VNet C. Will the machines within this particular VNet be able to talk to these ones in this particular VNet B? So anyone, I need someone to try. Yes, Jalika? So, so you're saying it won't extend to this VNet C? No, I'm not connecting VNet A to VNet B. I just want to connect VNet A to VNet C and VNet B to VNet C. Now you understand that with this pairing now, these guys are able to talk to this guy. These guys are able to talk to this guy. There is no direct connection here, but because they're able to talk to this guy, do you feel like there will be a connection through this guy to this guy? There's no direct connection here. There's no direct connection, but there's connection from here to the and from. Say that again. VNet. So are you saying, so I need, is a must for me to create connection, the pairing between the VNet A and B to be able to communicate, right? Any other person, anyone want to try again? So we've got a counter opinion. Sam said, A and B has no direct connection, but they can communicate since they share communication connection with C. Anyone going with that, or are you guys going with Jerica? Oh my, these guys cannot hear me. Okay, let's just continue. Yes, there is no direct connection. It's never going to be able to communicate. No way. There is VNet C doesn't stand as the gateway between them. No way. There must be a direct pairing for VNet A devices to be able to connect with VNet B devices. Regardless of even if they are connected to VNet C, so nothing flows through them. Nothing flows through VNet C. You understand? So there must be a direct connection between those. So I'm going with Jerica this way in this. Sam, sorry, not this one. So there must be a direct connection between those two guys to be able to communicate. Now, this picture you can see here shows a typical communication or connection or topology, as we call it, when you want to extend your virtual network in Azure to on-premises environment. Now you can see we call this type of topology up and spoke network. I'm so sure everyone have done this when we were in school. Secondary school. Up and spoke. So what the hub network does is it's just one network, and that's where you have all the essential, resources deployed to, and that's where the connection to on-premises happens. So on-premises environment doesn't understand VNet B, it doesn't know VNet A, it doesn't even know VNet Z. The only thing it knows is this hub VNet, because that's where we have the gateway. The connection happens within this particular VNet. So connection to on-premises is from this VNet to on-premises environment. Now we now have this pairing between this particular guy so that all devices coming from on-premises environment can still talk to the other VNets. And that's what you can see, and that's why you can see the pairing to this particular hub network. So all these other networks, they are called spoke networks. So they are trying to tap into what this guy does. Most times we don't have resources like virtual network, like virtual machines deployed within this particular network, except when we want to troubleshoot and feel like, oh, can we even get to this particular machine? If you're able to get to this machine from on-premises, then if we are not able to get to this one, we might need to check what's happening with the pairing. Maybe one of the reasons why you might have, but majorly core resources are going to be deployed within this particular network, because that's what's making the communication to on-premises happen. And that's why you can see the gateway subnet I showed you the other time as one of the subnets you can create. And within the gateway subnet, you have the VPN gateway, deployed within an on-premises environment. This VPN gateway will now connect to a gateway devices on-premises environment. Yeah, Jerica, please. The up and spoke. So the hub network is the network where the core services that makes the connection to the on-premises, you get. But the other ones, which are the spoke networks, just directly connect to the hub network, to gain access, to the on-premises environment, or to be able to communicate with the on-premises environment. So for the up and spoke, there is no direct connection between the spoke network and the on-premises environment. Only the hub network gets this direct connection to the on-premises environment. So I would say, in a layman term or in summary, the hub and spoke network is the type of network topology where devices which are the spoke devices now connect to a central hub. So the hub network acts as a central or a primary point of communication between the on-premises environment and the other spoke network within the environment. Does that make sense? Not on the cloud now. So the hub network now, it sits in the cloud. Do you understand? Now I've connected, let's say I've created three network now, the VNet 1, VNet 2, and VNet 3. In my VNet 3, that's where I'm going to deploy all the resources needed to extend my virtual network in Azure to my on-premises environment. Meaning that's where my VPN, connection is going to sit. my VPN gateway and the like. That's where I'm going to configure them. Now, that means if I do that, anyone coming from the on-premises environment are going to be able to connect to that network, that VNet 3 in Azure. And all resources within that network can be connected to from any client system from my on-premises environment. However, I've got other devices that have been connected to other network, but I need that connection to happen also, from my on-premises environment to other network or other devices within the other network. So what I would just do is to pair the other network with that particular hub network where my VPN sits. So the other network now, in this case, are going to be referred to as spoke networks, because they are not the primary network, that makes communication to the on-premises happen. They are just tapping from that particular primary network, to be able to connect to on-premises devices. Does that make any sense? Yep. Thank you. So I'm just going to continue. So you can see what happened there. Here they've got 10.1, 10.2, 10.3, and that's why these guys are able to connect, even if you want to pair. So I explained this already, so we don't need to really dive into it. So this is just where you're creating the VNet pairing, all the settings you need to see. You can take a look at these also. Now, service chaining. So what do we call service chaining? So service chaining, as you can see, enables your traffic from one network to a virtual appliance in a paired network to what we call a user defined. Now I explained this already. When we talk about routing, do you want the system defined route, or you want to leverage on user defined? System defined in the sense that it may be Microsoft defined route. Now the system has a way of, now when you get your internet now, or let's say your router, you bought a router, let's say you bought Starlink. Now what Starlink does is it's connect directly to your system, or it gives, because it acts as router, you got this router attached to it, and it assign your systems IP addresses to be able to communicate to the internet. Now when the communication start happening, or the traffic is going to be, or the route is going to be from your system directly to the internet, there is nothing in between, because it's system defined. That's how the system is defined. It just go directly to the internet. Anything that comes from the internet also comes directly to you, and that's why they'll say, oh, okay, unfortunately, that system has been corrupted. You need to get like some, what do we call it again, antivirus, just to scan your system for security purposes and the likes, but when you work in an organization where security is one of the things you guys look at, you do not want that connection from client system just to go directly to the internet. Anything going out of the internet, going out of the system to the internet and coming in from the internet, you want it to go to a virtual appliance, maybe like a firewall, before it even gets to the internet. So you want to define the route, so you can deploy the firewall within your environment and say anything going out needs to get to this particular appliance before going out. A typical way, just like we've seen the other way, other time, let's say I've created a VPN gateway within my environment, and I want everything going out just the same way. When you extend your on-premises environment, your Azure environment to on-premises, we've created what we call the VPN gateway. All traffic going to on-premises environment will go through that VPN gateway. That's system defined. Now you can now define your own and say from there you want this to go. Yes, a route table will be created, but in Azure, the way we create the route table is a little bit different. I'm just quickly going to show you. So when you create your own route, that's where, I would say you've actually created what we call, or you're leveraging what we call um, the service chaining. So here you can see I'm just going to create like a route table, and the way we create the route, the way the route table looks like here is just you. It's just like okay, let me just create the route table and see. I'm gonna create it within that same so regardless, and let's say test. That's not how to spell test. That's too much of this. So every time you're creating this route table, you always have to do propagate route table, for this to be able to get propagated, whatever you need. So now that I've been able to create the route table, so within the route table, I just start creating, those routes. Where are you, man? Yep. So I've created my route table. Now can now create, those routes. Now currently I do not have any route. So if I want to create a new route, I just click on this route. Then this is what this does. Just giving it a name. Not again, man. Then what will be the destination? Now if I say I've got a firewall within my environment, and that firewall sits here, which is 10.0.1.15, let's say, why am I having, okay, so let me say it sits here. I thought you would take destination IP address 1.0. What do you mean? Okay, dot 0.0. Yep. So the next up, meaning from this particular, VNet, or from this particular, where should be the destination? What should be the next up? So do you want to send it directly to the internet? Do you have a virtual appliance, or is there a additional network that you want to send it to? Do you want it to go directly to the network before it gets to the internet? Do you have any virtual, let's say you're creating this, you're attaching this to a VNet where, a hub VNet, we have actually created my gateway, VPN gateway. Do you want it in there, or do you want to send it directly to the internet? Or because this is a private network, you cannot send private network to the internet. So if I want to do that, I'll be talking about something like 192.168. So it's looking for, a public IP address if you want to send it to the internet. But I'm just going to look at the private, or do you have a private, like a virtual appliance? So if I've got like a firewall now, and I want all communication to go to that particular firewall, then I would put the IP address of that particular firewall here. So that's how, you had a route. That's how you define, the route within the Azure environment. So when I create that particular routing table, and I created my own route, the next thing for me, let's even complete it. So let's say 10 dot 1 dot 1 dot 65, something like this, and I'm actually adding the route, or you want this to. So if you check here, it's not connected or associated to any subnet. So what I need to do is now to associate this particular route to, the network. So there is no limit. You cannot. It is not just for a particular route. So a particular subnet, you can attach your route to multiple subnets. So you can come here and say, I want to attach this guy, to this particular subnet. Then you go ahead to do that. I don't want to do that because it's going to, messed up some other things within the environment. So anything you want to do, you want to define the route, you want to define the next, the next virtual appliance where whatever is coming it needs to get to, then you can actually do that using your routing table. So, and that's what this guy is actually defining, saying if you want to leverage user defined route, you need to create your custom routing. So you need to be able to say, this is where I want this to go. Anything coming from this particular network, the next up should be this. That means the next destination should be this, and that's what you're looking at there. So we are told to configure peering on a virtual network and confirm the peering on the other network. So this will be my first assignment for you guys. If you do not have any place to test this, please ask me to create your account within my test environment. I can still do that. So I want you to create 2 different networks. Then within each of those networks, create at least 1 virtual machine. If you're using my subscription, you turn it off once you're done. So you create the machine in the first one, create the machine in the second one, and pair those 2 networks together and see if you could ping the IP address, the private IP address of the machine from the other one. Once you are able to do that, screenshot it and send it to me. Does that make sense? So I want you guys to create 2 virtual networks. Within each of these networks, I need you to create at least 1 virtual machine. You understand? Then you pair those 2 networks together and try to ping the IP address of one of those machines from another machine. So when you create those machines, you need to be able to RDP into that machine. So if you need any help, let me know. But I need you guys to be able to create this so that the machine in the first network can actually talk to the machine in the second network. Is that clear now? Does that make sense now? Oh, lovely. Okay. So manage and control traffic flow with routes. I'm so sure we don't really need to talk much about this. It's still gonna be talking about, the routes that I just talked about. Now here we're gonna be looking at the system route. I just said there is a default route for each connection, for each traffic coming in. We've got Azure or Microsoft that has actually defined some system routes. However, if you want to leverage what we call the service training, you want to create your own route, you want to define your own route. We call it user defined route. So you want to be the one to say, this is where I need this guy to go to, this is where the traffic should go to, this is the next up, before getting into my environment. Fine. Then we look at the custom routing table, which I've showed you guys. Service endpoints. What do we even mean by service endpoint? Private link. What do we mean by private link? I think those are the 2 we really need to just talk about. But let's go ahead. For security purposes, yes, that's why we use those ones, but we'll get there. So system routes. Let's even talk about these. Regardless of where your connection is actually coming from, your traffic is coming from, the communication, is it something you are sending back to the on-premises? Is it a traffic or connection to the internet? You want to be the one to define, but in this case it's already defined. So you have connection from your subnet to the internet is system route. So that means traffic between VM in the same subnet, there is a route already configured for that. That's the system route. Even when you can still come and change your own and attach a custom route to it. VMs between different subnets in the same network, there is a system route already defined on how they communicate. Data flow from VMs to the internet, is just a direct connection. There is a route already, communication between VMs using a VNet to VNet VPN, VNet to VNet peering. There's a communication already, site to site communication, sorry, site to site VPN or express route communication to VPN gateway. There is, a system route already defined for it, and you guys understand, the system route meaning these are default routes already designed by the system, But for us, we feel like that doesn't really make sense for us. Just look at this from so machines that sit here, which are the web servers. I was talking about the fact that when you want to browse most of these applications like google.com still have a proxy um, server in front of their web server. So you cannot just get to the web server without going to that particular proxy server. Now, here, if you are actually leveraging the system defined, it's just going to go directly to the server, to the internet, which might not make sense in terms of security. But now compare it here to this one, where you have like a virtual machine, everything going to the internet with this is the proxy server. It takes every communication coming in, checks it before it sends it to the frontend subnet, and also anything going out to the internet are also being checked. So that's where you define your own route. You say no, I don't want this to go. So most of the people that they just don't want to start creating a proxy server within their environment. They just leverage services that have proxies, and that's why you always see Cloudflare most times, and they will tell you, especially when you don't have internet connection, you get like a notification or an error saying, oh, you are connected to the Cloudflare. That's fine. Connection between you and Cloudflare is fine, but connection between Cloudflare and the web application you're looking for, it's a problem. So it just tells you that okay, your internet is fine, but with Cloudflare cannot communicate with the web server. Maybe there is a downtime on the web server. So that Cloudflare is acting as like a proxy server. Anything going in goes to that particular proxy server or virtual appliance before even getting to so you can define your route. You want to be the one to select the next hop, and that's what we've seen with that custom routes I was trying to create the other time. So you just say create route table, add route table, associate table to a subnet. You can see I'm a little bit too forward, but at least it helps. All right. Now, any question before I go ahead to start talking about service endpoint? This is a different thing entirely. Now we are not talking about route here. Okay, let's talk about this one. I'll put it in this case. You want to connect to database or a storage account. Your virtual machine needs to connect to a storage account. Now, if let's even say the virtual machine have got like a public IP address, and the storage account also has opened. They've opened the network. When you go to the networking, you can see public access. Even if you might not be able to assign an IP address to that particular storage account, or database, but you still want to be able to connect. So instead of just allowing any resource to be able to communicate, we can actually have what we call a service endpoint. That service endpoint is, what is called endpoints, right? Anyone wants to try endpoints? What are endpoints? Yep. So yes, something like that. So when we say endpoint, it might be maybe a device, that connect to a network, something like that, like what you're actually trying to connect to. Do you understand? So google.com, that's an endpoint, right? So something like what you said, just the receiving end or something. Let me put it that way. So what you now feel like a service endpoint will be. So in this case, what Azure, or what Microsoft had, in thought when they were creating this is they want to secure your Azure services or your Azure resources by extending your network to a particular service. So if you do not open that particular service, then no other resources can actually be able to connect to it. So you want to make sure that only resources that you have actually allowed are able to connect. So you want to pinpoint some services, so you're only extending that your virtual network to identify only some services. So if I pick storage, so that means I only want access to this storage. So any connection, will be to storage account within that environment. So it's not just opened. So you just want, access. Now you can see if I create a service endpoint, you can see I'm just saying, okay, I want to create a service endpoint to storage, or I want to create it to SQL. So all those, I will only be able to connect to all those services, regardless other ones, there won't be connection. Now you can see that's why the internet is actually blocked, because I'm not allowing connection to that kind of service. I'm only allowing connection or extending my virtual network to identify services that have actually opened, via this service endpoint. So connection is not just to any endpoint, is only to the type of endpoint I've actually opened. So that's what the service endpoint is for. Now, private link, it's a little bit related to the service endpoint, but the way this works is, now I've got a database, and that database, or let's say a storage account, which doesn't, you cannot assign an IP address to it. So, but I need connection to that particular database. I need connection to that particular database. What I can do is I can create what we call a private link. And what the private link does is it's going to create a private IP address for you for that particular. It's not for that particular resource, because technically there are some resources you cannot assign an IP address to. IP address can only be associated with devices that have got NIC, like your virtual machine, or machine or devices that can actually take IPs, just like your application gateway. I've got what we call the front end configuration, where you can actually associate an IP address to. So that particular resource needs to have like a property or something, or a like just like something you can actually associate a network to, an IP to, so, but in this case you cannot do that with the SQL, storage account and the likes. So what you can do is you are going to create what we call a private endpoint. So that private link, it creates like a private IP address for you. Now that particular link will now be associated with that resource that doesn't have IP address associated to with. So what will now happen is, when you want to make that connection, you are not making that connection directly to the SQL that you can see here. You are making that connection to the NIC of that private endpoint. So that link now will have what we call an NIC, and that's what you are actually going to be making that connection to. So let's say your machine has got IP address of 10.0.1.1, the private link might have IP address of 10.0.1.2. Now they are able to communicate because it looks as if they are within. So now all the other SQLs now are now going to be getting traffic via that private endpoint that has been created, or private link that has been created. So that's what you can see here. Private connectivity to services in Azure. On a normal day, like I said, if you want to be able to connect most of these things, you are going to be connecting over public IP address, or even if you want to restrict it, you need to start adding let me see if I can show you guys. You need to start adding the VNets that can actually connect. Sorry. To make it a little bit clearer, let me see. I think I've got, should have keywords here. Yep. Just hold on. Yep, I should have keywords. Now, if I go to the networking part of this guy doesn't have a public IP. It doesn't have an IP address associated with it. But I want to be able to connect to this guy. Here, I've got public access from all network. That's the only reason why my on-premises device will be able to connect to this particular keyword. I don't want that. My machine in Azure only have a private IP address. Why do I want to connect to other devices or other services in Azure over public IP address? Over public network. I don't want that. I want that connection to be over private, network. So how do I do this? I need to select this particular option. This particular option means I do not want anyone to be able to connect. However, only IP addresses that I've added here should be able to connect. So I can have something like 192.168. Let's say this is my IP address, 33.45. So meaning only this particular machine that I've got this IP should be able to connect to this my keyboard, which is fine. But if it's still connected over the public network. Same thing, I can have an existing network here. Maybe there are other devices within my other network that I want to give them access to this particular keyboard. I can add the network where those devices are from this particular blade, but it's still open to internet. It's still open to public network. I don't want it. So the only thing I can do is to disable this. When I disable this, how do I now want to connect to this particular keyboard? It has got no IP address. How do I want to connect to it? So the only thing is I can create what we call like a private endpoint. And what that's going to do is going to give like a link to that particular service. It's going to create an NIC for me, and that NIC, that nick is going to be assigned a private IP address. That private IP address will now be what I will use in order to communicate with this particular keyboard. Let me just quickly. I don't want to do this. This is where my Terraform script is, but let's see, because that will break. So you can see immediately I typed in test there, it's going to create a nick for me, which is the network interface card. Just like you have in your what's this thing, virtual machines. So you can see where do you want to create these, what resource are you looking at. So here I'm going to select keywords. That's going to be vault. It's going to be vault. Where are you, man? Yep. So it's going to be vault, and you can see select the private link resource. what private link, what resource do you want to create that particular private link for. So the next thing, what network, are you going to deploy that particular private endpoint. Then the DNS, then I can go ahead to just create. But I don't want to create this because once you create this, it's going to take off the public, connection. And I'm actually doing this for my Azure environment, so it's going to affect some other things. So I don't want to go with that. But that's how you can actually create like a link. So what you're trying to do is to take off the the public network, access that is currently configured on that particular resource, and you want to just limit that to connections or devices within your environment. Even when you extend it to on-premises, when you extend your VNet from Azure to on-premise, you have the private IP address also assigned to your system, which sits on your on-premises environment, and you want to connect to that particular endpoint, you'll be able to connect. And that's why when you go to the office, they tell you, do you want to connect to this? If you want to connect to this system, just go on. You don't need to go on VPN when you are in the office, but when you are home, you need to connect to VPN to be able to connect to this website. You need to connect to the VPN to be able to fill your timesheet, or else the application for the timesheet is not going to open. But when you're in the office, you don't need the VPN because there's a VPN connection already set up within your office. That's what we call the site to site. When we start talking about the type of VPN and how to configure VPN, I think it should be the next class. We'll talk about the point to site, where the connection is happening from your client system to the Azure environment. If it's site to site, we have that connection from Azure to the office. So that's where we'll talk about VPN device within your office network. So that's why when you go into the office, you do not need to start connecting the VPN on your client system again. So on your point, so because we call that one point to site, that means a particular system to the cloud VNet is the point to site. But if it's just connection from your office to the cloud VNet space, and it's site to site, because all the connection is it has been done on that particular VNet within your within your on-premises environment. Just bring in your device, connect to the on-premise environment or on-premise network via cable or Wi-Fi, and you are able to access all the resources within the Azure environment, or the backbone of it, the one that goes to the backbone, the one that goes to the private um, connection, which we call the express route. So we are going to talk about all those. What are the pros and cons? Why do we consider, the point to side? Why do we need to consider the side to side? Or why do we leverage the express route? So that's what we're going to be talking about in the next class. So that's how we configure all those private link, and that's the use. You just want to make sure that only devices within the private space are able to connect to those devices, to those resources that you've created within the environment, and you do not want to open this to the internet. So the labs would be the ones. So I need you to complete this lab also. If you go to it, these are things that we've done today. What they just did was to create virtual machines and virtual networks, virtual machines in different networks. They use the network watcher to test the connection between virtual machines. So this was what I was saying. Because those machines are actually in different network, you want to be sure that they are able to connect to each other after you've paired the network. So they configure the network pairing and test the connection between those two machines. Those two machines exist in different virtual networks. So you can use the Azure PowerShell. That is a PowerShell script which you can actually use to test, or you can actually use an LDP option. How do we use an LDP option? So you've paired two networks together. Within those networks, you've got your virtual machines. So you've got one virtual machine in the first network, you've got another virtual machine in another network. So, and you want to do the testing, you want to see if they're able to communicate. So you can do an RDP from one of those machines to the other machine, using the IP address of the other machine, and see if you are going to be able to connect from that particular machine. Then the last thing for you is to be able to create a custom route. So we are still going to be looking at all this in maybe after the next class when we're done with networking. Then we'll quickly work on all the labs, on networking. But I will need you also to go and look at this. And if you've got any question, any issue, just let me know. So that will end today's class. If you have got any question, ask so that I can actually respond. The ones I cannot respond to, I will pick one of you guys to answer. Or just joking. Any question? Okay. We've got no questions, so I'm just gonna call it a day. We talk.